Today I'd like to share with you the way I make a pretty typical abuelita meal. Now, abuelita, my grandmother, had me help her in the kitchen for years, and finally she ended up helping me, and then she would end up simply supervising what I did. So as much as possible, I try to follow her recipes and techniques. What I'm going to prepare for you is kind of a shortcut typical meal that abuelita might make. Black beans and rice, sweet plantains, plátano maduro, and marinated pork chops with onions, salad, and bread. Very typical, and I helped abuelita make this meal many times. We're going to start this meal by marinating pork chops. Now, I like medium cut pork chops, not real thin and not real thick. These are a little thinner than I'd like, but they're going to be pretty tasty and pretty quick to fry. Notice I have a rim of fat. I prefer more fat than that. It keeps the chops juicy while they're cooking. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and squeeze lime all over the pork chops. We want to let them sit up at least 4 to 24 hours ahead of time. I like to use one of these manual squeezers. These limes are Persian limes. They're not as juicy as key limes, but they'll do the job and they're readily available. I like to double squeeze them. Try to get every bit of lime juice I can. Again, these are a little on the dry side, but contact time with the lime juice will still impart a lot of flavor. I'll load this up now with all these little remnants of Persian lime. There we go. I may have to add a few more later. Let's see what's going on with that. Over the years, I've learned to take some shortcuts that really seem to make a very little difference in the overall meal. Garlic powder. A lot of garlic powder. We may add more later. Little onion powder. Notice how precisely I measure. Ha! Abuelita did not teach me how to measure. And oregano. Next, I'm going to take a couple of forks and pierce the chops, move them around. Now remember, they're going to be in here for a while. Let's add some more garlic powder. Can hardly go wrong with too much garlic powder, too much lime. That's hard to do. Looks like I'm going to have to add some more lime juice. Went to the store, got a few more limes. Lime juice is so critical to this dish. It's the way abuelita used to make it. It's very simple, but gotta have lime juice or sour orange. Now, sour oranges are hard to come by in my neck of the woods here in southern Louisiana, but in Florida we used to get them, and on occasion I can find them here, but not often. Okay, add a little more lime juice. Next, I'm going to add onion. Now, I generally prefer just plain yellow onions for this application. That's what was always used traditionally. In this case, however, I happen to have Vidalia onions in the fridge. It is season for them, so we're going to use Vidalias. All right. Very simple. Throw them in. And I think I spied a red onion in there, so I'm going to throw the red onion in as well. Turned out it was only part of a red onion. We'll throw it in because it's going to be a little sharper than the Vidalia and colorful. Here we go. Go ahead and move these chops around a little bit. I'll move around the pork chops in the lime juice and seasoning and onions 2 or 3 times in the next 6-8 hours. Just want to make sure that the seasoning comes in contact with all of the meat, and looks like I may have to add some more later. And I'll check on this a little bit later to see if I need to add still more lime juice. As I said, you can hardly have too much lime juice. The next step is to make a little traditional topping for pork, and that is onion and parsley and lime juice. Yes, this is an onion intensive meal. Yes, it's a lime intensive meal. And again, I'm using Vidalia onions because they're in season, and it's what I've got in the fridge. Probably the standard yellow onion is a little better. The sharper taste is mellowed out by the lime juice and the sweetness of the parsley. So I tend to just roughly chop it. From our garden, little parsley. Of course, I rinsed it thoroughly and dried it. Obviously, my knife skills are not that of a professional chef, but just a home cook. Lime juice. May have to add some more onion. These limes are not very juicy at all. They're easily the least juicy limes I've had in ages. When I was cooking with Abuelita, I always had key limes, rarely Persian limes. Whoa, not much juice in there. I know you're saying, well, half this video is squeezing lime. Well, it's important. There we go. Let's see if that'll work. Keep bumping the camera, sorry about that. Or in this case, the iPhone. No camera, just an iPhone. Maybe a little more onion. Sometimes I just barely slice the onion into rings. Today I feel like rough chopping it. I think that's going to be enough. And again, I'll come back throughout the day and stir it every now and then. If you use regular onions, like yellow onions that are very sharply flavored, you'll find that soaking in the lime juice with the parsley mellows the flavors, and it's a rather unique topping for pork. Also use it for roast chicken. Next is the preparation of probably the most important element of this meal, aside from pork chops, and that is black beans. Everybody has a different black bean recipe. The recipe that I'm going to show you is one that Abuelita taught me, and I cooked it with her in the kitchen. In fact, when I was a little kid, I started to watch her cook, and then she would describe what she was doing, and as she aged, I ended up doing it while she told me what to do, and so I've cooked this dish over and over and over again with Abuelita, and then since. And it's different from some. recipes, obviously, but it's, to my recollection, as close as you can come to having Abuelita's black beans. And as you can see, onions again, and this is a red onion. She used mostly yellow onions, occasionally white onions. Nothing fancy at all, very simple cooking. Looks like a lot of onions, but that'll cook down. And next, garlic. And 5 garlic toes. What do you call them? Toes? Cloves. And she used garlic powder too. Oh my gosh. And she used dried beans. I'm shortcutting the process because I think that the canned beans work very well, and takes shorter amount of time to prepare, and I get the results that are very, very similar to working with dried beans. So basically I'm crushing the garlic toes, the cloves. Sorry, I keep bumping the camera there. Remove the skin. There we go. And rough cut. I rarely do any fine mincing. These beans will cook for a long time, so all this will break down. There we go, on top of the onions. What's next? I know, you know what's next. Olive oil, a good quality olive oil. We're going to expose it to heat. I don't know, what's that, about 1/2 cup? That's what we'll start with anyway. We'll add more later. And I'm going to get that on the stove to start sweating down, and then I'll add the other ingredients. Can you smell the garlic and the onions? Oh man, smells like heaven. That started, so I'm going to go ahead and add the next ingredient. Next ingredient, some bell pepper. Abuelita always used green bell pepper. I tend to prefer the less bitter flavor of red or yellow or golden. I also probably don't use quite as much bell pepper as she did. I'll just pop this into the pot. I know you can't smell this, wish you could. You'd be salivating now. And we're gonna let this cook away here for just a little while longer till the onions start to go translucent. Taking the onions off the stove, put them on a trivet here on top of the cutting board. Now I'm gonna add 2 cans of beans, black beans, sometimes called black turtle beans, and I try to get the kind of canned bean that has very little flavoring other than some salt, because I'm going to add the flavoring to the beans. 2 cans in. Again, it's a shortcut. It's a shortcut. Little sprinkle of sugar, not much. That will help cut the bitterness of the bell pepper if there's any. A couple of shakes of a lamb's tail. Let's get this centered under the camera for you. Just a couple of drops of Tabasco. A little sprinkle of oregano. Not much. She put in a little bit. Let's see, what's next? Bay leaf, important ingredient. Bay leaf. And this is not California bay leaf. California bay leaf has a different flavor. I like the bay leaf flavor, so I'm putting in 3 bay leaves. Give it a stir. And now for a very important ingredient. Vinegar, white vinegar. No, not wine vinegar, not sherry vinegar, not malt vinegar. Just plain old white vinegar is what Abuelita always used. And I used 2 cups of, or 2 cans of beans rather. So I'm using about a half a can of vinegar. And I want to get the goodness out of the can, so I'm pouring it back and forth. Pour that in there. About a half a can of vinegar. Again, stirring to incorporate all of that. And I'll take and put this right back on the stove. The beans have been on the stove now for, probably 6 or 8 minutes. I brought them to a boil, stirring, and they will cook almost all day, 3-4 hours at least, maybe longer. I also like to bring them to a boil, shut down the stove, let them cool, then reheat. I do that a few times. I think it helps break down the beans and make them creamier. I like creamy style black beans, just like Abuelita's. While the beans are cooking, I've put together a salad. Pretty simple salad. Lettuce, tomatoes, onion, some sweet bell pepper again. And again, I did not use the green. Put all these in here. Now, traditionally, it was always served with just a little olive oil and vinegar, maybe some salt and pepper, some slices of avocado, ripe avocado on top. The perfect salad. I don't have avocado, couldn't find any that were reasonably ripe, and in this part of the country we can only find California avocados, the very small hand grenade looking avocados, not the large green avocados that I grew up with and that was always on Abuelita's table. The other important issue is that the olive oil, in this case, should be pretty good quality, taste really good, like extra virgin olive oil, cold pressed, not cheap olive oil. Abuelita, of course, always had Cuban bread on the table. We're going to have French bread here later this evening with this meal, and sweet plantains. Sweet plantains. Now, again, a shortcut. Oh yes, I could get the plantains, I can, and let them ripen and slice and fry them, and that's wonderful. I have found that this particular brand, Goya sweet plantains, taste just about the same, sometimes even better, and I'll take them out of the box, fry them in a little vegetable oil, never fry in olive oil, not plantains, and serve them alongside. Also in advance, I'll get ready to make the rice. Of course, this is served with white rice traditionally, and I use the 2-to-1 method. That's 2 cups of water, and I'll add 1 cup of rice a little later when we're getting ready to cook it. This is all being set up ahead of time. Some kosher salt. She used regular iodized salt. And just a splash of olive oil. And that's set up for a little later when I'll actually bring that water to a boil and add a cup of rice. The rice will be, in this case, basmati rice. We like that. It's a nice long grain rice with a little nutty flavor. Abuelita usually used long grain. Mahatma was the brand that she most often used. And the rice will be rinsed, of course. This is the method I like to use for rinsing the rice. I'll go ahead and take the cup of rice, put it in a small strainer, and then rinse it over the sink and let it drip till it's almost dry. Later I'll add it to the boiling water. Cook it for 20 minutes and it's done. I keep rinsing it until the water runs clear beneath the strainer. It's pretty clear now. I'll just set it aside here to drain the rest of the way. By the way, Abuelita always liked to cook in cast iron. So there's one on the stove for the pork chops and onions. And I've got another one that I'll use a little bit later to fry the plantains. Well, the black beans have been cooking for about 3.5, 4 hours, and I turned them down and then I turned them off, and you can see they've gotten very creamy. They'll break down even more before I serve dinner. When I serve, I'll take out the bay leaves so nobody accidentally gets a bay leaf. I think the black beans start to break down as they get cool and reheated again. So I like to turn on the heat and bring them to a boil, let them simmer for an hour or so, and then turn off the heat, let them sit. Some folks who make black beans actually make them the day before and then let them sit overnight, and they tend to get very creamy that way. Well, the beans are done right now, and they're nice and creamy. They'll be delicious. Guess it's time to get the rice on. 2 cups of water, a little olive oil, salt, and when that comes to a boil, I'm going to put in 1 cup of rinsed basmati rice. Again, Abuelita used to use long grain mahatma, I guess. And 20 minutes later, we'll have a nice pot of fluffy rice. Looks like the rice water is boiling. Time to add the rice. Give it a good stir. Always with a fork. Abuelita said always with a fork. And now we'll let that come back to a boil. Looks like it's coming back to a boil rather quickly. We'll put the lid on, and I'll lower the heat to just a simmer for 20 minutes. I guess the next step is to get ready to fry pork chops and onions and plantains. Guess I put about 1/4 cup of vegetable oil. Again, always with vegetable oil. That's the small pan for plantains, plátano maduro, and about the same in the large cast iron pan for pork chops and onions. I just took the pork chops out of the refrigerator, and you can see they've turned a nice shade of gray, which means that all that lime juice is working away to help tenderize and marinate the meat, absorb all that oregano and garlic, lime juice. We'll sprinkle a little salt on it, and we'll fry them along with the onions in just a little bit. Timer just went off, so that means the rice is done. Again, use a fork to fluff it up. I always use the fork. That's 1 cup of rice. That should be enough for tonight. Okay, I've just started the oil for the plantains. ripe plantains are traditionally served with this meal. And put the fire on under the big skillet for pork chops. I set up a rack here, a little paper towel over a pan for the plantains. I take them out of the grease. Then I can throw them in the oven and allow them to stay warm until we serve. Again, I took the shortcut, sweet ripe plantains from Goya. They're defrosted, and I'm going to let them finish here in the hot oil. Again, it's vegetable oil, never, never, never olive oil. Now, as these ripe plantains get a little cooked, they'll start to get sweet, actually. The sugars will caramelize, and they're sweet already, but they'll even get sweeter as they cook. And it'll take, I don't know, about 10 minutes or so on medium heat. Obviously, I'm not very good at giving specific directions. Hope you are visual learners. It's time to put the pork chops in the pan. Looks like the skillet is hot, smoking just a little bit, the oil smoking just a little bit, so let's go ahead and put the chops in. Hard to hold the camera and cook at the same time. So not great camera work. Okay, the heat is on high, at least for the first part of the chop cooking. Notice I didn't put the onions in. We put the onions in near the end. Let's see. About time to turn the plantains over. Again, please forgive my bad camera work here, trying to cook and tape at the same time. I tweaked the heat up on the plantains just a little bit. It looks like it's time to turn it back down. They're going to be good. They're going to be real good. You can tell, the darker they get, the sweeter they are. Over here to the other skillet, pork chops. Turn those over. No, maybe a little early. Let's turn that one just a little early. I'm going to turn that back. Because we can develop a little bit of crust on it before we turn it. Alright, let's see what the chops look like. Ah, that's better. That's much better. Didn't make it on that, but that's okay. A lot of flavor from the marinade. Plantains is just about done. Well, I took the last plantains off the stove, and I'm going to put them in the oven to stay warm while the pork is finishing. Just took the pork chops out of the pan. They're going to go in the oven for just a moment while I finish the onions. Well, it looks like the onions have browned nicely, a little color, and of course they've been marinating with the pork, the lime juice and the other seasonings. I'll take those off and they'll go in the pork, and it's just about ready to eat. There we go, pork with grilled onions, black beans and rice, sweet plantains. Oh, and of course our parsley and onions for the top of the pork. Put it right on top of the pork. Some people put onions on top of black beans, and that's great. Usually that's a non-marinated onion, just a raw diced onion for the top of the black beans, but the marinated onions and parsley, they go on top of the pork. Don't forget the salad. I almost did. And Becky pointed out just a few moments ago that this actually has onions two ways. Some people like the grilled onions on top of the pork. Others like the marinated onion and parsley. I love both, so I put the onions to the side and will work them in as I can. Sweet plantains, black beans and rice, pork, onions two ways, and of course we have salad, but that's relatively uninteresting, and Cuban bread, or in our case, French bread, being in Louisiana.